Good morning. Good to see everyone here this morning. If you would, be turning in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 3. Daniel in chapter 3. The title of this morning's lesson is Even If. It's coming out of Daniel chapter 3. The idea behind it is, sure, most of us have experienced this one time or another. But I was thinking, how can I relate this? What example could I give? And, I just thought a lot about what we do in our everyday life. Sometimes let's just say we invite somebody over, or maybe even a few people over. And, we clean the house and we prepare a meal. And then we think, you know what? I'm going to do this even if they don't come. I'm going to have me a clean house and something to eat. Or, you save up money because you want to go on a trip or take a vacation. Something happens. Well, hey, you know what? Even if it doesn't happen, I've got me some money saved. It's this idea of we're going to do something even if the outcome that we think is going to happen doesn't happen. And we're going to see that was the statement of faith and the attitude of these three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And in Daniel chapter 3, it is the story of the king Nebuchadnezzar that builds for himself a huge statue. Now, I'm reading out of the New American Standard. And that's where I get the words, even if. Your translation, when we get to that point, it might say, but if he doesn't. So I thought I'm going to preach out of the New American Standard, even if nobody else has that translation. It's going to make sense for this part. Anyway, let's begin reading in verse 13 of chapter 3 of Daniel. I'm sorry, let me catch you up right here first, and then we'll start reading in verse 13. So the king has had these dreams, and Daniel has actually interpreted his dream. And the first dream that we're going to look at, not the second, we won't go that far, but the first dream is he has this dream of a statue, and he doesn't tell anybody. He wants them to tell him his dream and the interpretation. And Daniel says, you had a dream of this statue. And when he interprets a dream, it is a statue of 4 to 5 different materials. And the head is made of gold. He says, that's you, O king. You are the head of gold. And the next material is silver, which is the Medo-Persians. And then the next material is silver, which is Greece. And then the metal on the bottom is Rome. And then it's mixed with clay, he says. But then a rock is going to come and destroy that statue, and his kingdom is going to be everlasting. So the king decides he's going to build a statue, and he builds this statue all of gold. He didn't get the dream. Only the head is gold, king. No, but he made the whole statue gold. And the measurements that is given is like, I calculated it, and it's like 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. And this idea of how tall it is, it's given in cubits, but the cubit is about 18 inches in measurement. And if you wanted a type of reference, they say that the Statue of Liberty from the heel to the crown is about 111 feet. So maybe up to her shoulder is about 90 feet. That's how tall this statue was. And what the king wanted is when these people, everybody heard these certain instruments, that they were to bow down and worship this statue. And Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego would not do that. And that's where we are right now in verse 13. It says, Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and anger, gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready," almost like in case you weren't ready before, that's why you didn't bow down. "Now, if you are ready, at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, very well. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of my hand?" Remember that statement. Verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king." And here it is. "But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He commanded certain valiant warriors who were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Then these men were tied up, and their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their other clothes, and were cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. For this reason, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished and stood up in haste. He said to his high officials, "Was it not 3 men we cast bound into the midst of the fire?" They replied to the king, "Certainly, O king." He said, "Look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the 4th is like the son of the gods." S-O-N, not S-U-N, right? The son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He responded and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out, you servants of the Most High God, and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire. The satraps, the priests, the governors, and the king's high officials gathered around and saw in regard to these men, listen, this is amazing, that the fire had no effect on the bodies of the men, nor was the hair on their heads singed, nor were their trousers damaged, nor had the smell of fire even come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who put their trust in him, violating the king's command, and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own." When you understand this idea of the king wanting them to worship this image, and when they refused to, and then had that statement of faith that our God can deliver us from this, He'll take us from your hand. But even if he doesn't, we are not going to bow down to this image. First of all, these fiery furnaces, when you think, why would they have a furnace? Did they use it for heating? I mean, what was it for? These furnaces were actually quite large, and they would use them to burn bricks. This is where they would burn the bricks, dry them up, and have them ready to go and build. And now, if you've read about Nebuchadnezzar, he also built, I forgot what they called them, but his gardens. And I mean, they had a walkway full of stones. And they've come to find that when they found these bricks, these walkways, that underneath each brick, he inscribed his name upon them. This is my mighty Babylon, the town that I built, the kingdom that I built. It was all about him. He was humbled a few times in his life, for sure, if you continue to read through Daniel. And this is one of them. For he says, we're going to throw these men into this fire if you do not worship me. Because it was an image of him. And then he realized, blessed be to God, the God whom they serve. Because even though they rejected me, they would not reject their God. So when we really listen to the challenge that is there, he told them to bow down and worship this image. And then he says, where is that? It's in verse 15. He says, and what God is there that can rescue you from my hands? He had a hold of them. And what he wanted them to do was to worship the image. Now, when we think of worship, what is it we think of? We have made this word worship to mean what we're doing right now, right? We come and we sing. We come and we pray and we come and listen to a message and we're here together and this is worship. This is one word translated where the Hebrew word and the Greek word actually mean the same thing, that when you worship, what you're doing is you are paying homage to, or you are bowing down to. In other words, you are giving total submission to whatever it is that you are worshiping. And so when we come to worship and do all these things, what we're saying is that we are bowing down and giving everything to God. We are honoring him. And what they wanted was for everyone to bow down and worship and honor this image. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that this image was only that, an image. They knew that the God that they served could do whatever he wanted to, and that he was all-powerful, and there was none other like him, and that was the only one that they were going to bow down to, and to serve, and to give everything to. Nothing else. And so their statement of faith in verse 18 was, but even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods, nor worship the golden statue that you have set up. And then when we look at the last part in verses 24 through 27, it says that while these men were taking Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to the furnaces, that they were burnt up. And yet, their faith that they had in God led them into this furnace, and then the king saw them walking around unbound. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. We can all count. That's 3. The king was astonished too. Didn't we put 3 in there? Most certainly, O king. I see 4 of them. And then they came out. It says, not harmed, their hair not singed, and they didn't even smell like smoke. If I don't take a shower after I barbecue, me and Becky would go to bed hungry, man, because we can smell that smoke. I'm not even in it. You know, I mean, if ever you've cooked like that outside, or you started a fire in a pit or something, and made some s'mores. I'm getting hungry now, but you're going to smell like the smoke. And these furnaces were upped 7 times. And Nebuchadnezzar knew at that moment that there was a God definitely mightier than him. So how do we want to relate this story today? How do we want to take this statement of faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and put it in our lives? This congregation, as we announced this morning, is so supportive in people's lives that are going through things. There's always cards up front to sign. And man, that is so good. It is good to receive something like that. But none of us are exempt from a furnace. Here's what I mean. Some of us may be struggling through something. Some of us may not be having the best time in our lives right now because of something going on with a family member or something going on with someone else or whatever it is, a struggle, a temptation. Some of us may be struggling with illnesses. Sometimes there are illnesses that we really can't do anything about no matter how much medication we take. And some of us have been struggling with that for a long time. And we wonder, when's it going to stop? Some of us may be struggling in a relationship, at a job, whatever your furnace is. What if we had that statement of faith? What if your struggle and whatever it is that we just talked about is actually an image? It's the way we see things. It's an image of I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. I'm tired. This is it. What have we just done? We've worshipped and bowed down to that image. Because we're giving whatever it is that's against us honor. It doesn't deserve it. Because sometimes when we do that, we make it worse, and then we end up in the furnace. So when we read this passage, when we read of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and we even read of Daniel, who later said, I'm not going to stop praying because the king put a decree out that we can no longer pray to anybody but me, but he decides he's going to pray anyway, and then he gets thrown in the lion's den. It's that same idea. I am not going to stop worshiping and serving God, and I will not worship or bow down to anything or anyone else, no matter what it is. Because even if God doesn't heal me, even if I'm not released from this bad relationship, even if I'm going to struggle every day at my job, or even though I'm going to struggle every day at school, or even though friends are tempting me to do things, and even if all these things are coming my way, I will not give that honor. For I'm going to serve God and Him alone. And trust me, whatever your furnace is, He's there with you. We can't deny that. Sure, sometimes it may feel like He's not. Sure, sometimes it may feel like we're in it alone. But do you have that faith that they had? Are you truly believing in the words that say that even if I don't make it, or even if this is my time to go, I know where I'm going, because I'm going to remain faithful until the end. honestly think that if we had the faith of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, then maybe things wouldn't be so bad. I think if we had that faith, then we could truly understand what James meant in James 1 when he said, "Consider it pure joy, my brethren, when you face various trials." I think we could understand that joy if we had this faith. This is a powerful statement of faith. That we're going to live this life. That we're going to come worship our God. That we're going to sing together. That we're going to take of the Lord's Supper. That we're going to listen to a message from His Word and His Word alone. And even if I'm not having the best day of my life, I'm still going to go. Because I can't miss that. I'm going to worship God and Him alone. Because it is only Him that I will serve. And you know what? Others are going to see that in you also. And just like King Nebuchadnezzar couldn't help but to recognize God, when people see Him in you, they're going to do the same thing. There's something different about them. Why can they be so joyful in times of sorrow? How can they be so joyful when all these things are happening? How can they keep going even though all this is going on with them? How can they? Because we know that even if we don't make it, we're going somewhere for eternity. And that place, according to God's promise, is far better than any place here on earth. I want to take us to a few scriptures in the New Testament and just kind of bring it over the bridge and just see what the New Testament writers say about this same type of faith and faith statement. When we think of the faith statement that they had and the challenge that Nebuchadnezzar gave them, who can pluck you out of my hands, or who can take you from my hand, and I've got you, you can't escape. And they say, well, even if we don't live or whatever, we're not going to do that. 2 Corinthians 12, verses 7 through 10. A pretty well-known verse, and I've heard it used quite often. But I want us to look at it and think of it in this way, as a statement of faith, because of the challenge that Paul has as he is writing this letter and what's going on in his life. And we know what has happened to him before, that he was a persecutor of the church. He actually went and was trying to take people bound back to Jerusalem, away from those that are belonging to the way, he called it. And on that road to Damascus, he was trying to go out there. He was blinded, and something like scales were on his eyes. And Ananias came and touched him and told him, "Brother Saul, receive your sight." And it said something like scales fell from his eyes, and he got up, he was baptized, and then he washed away his sins, calling on the name of the Lord. And then he ate and drank after 3 days of not doing so. And so he had a lot of struggle. And at that point, his kinsmen were even coming after him to kill him. So many plots against him. And in 2 Corinthians 12, verses 7 through 10, he says this: "Because of the extraordinary greatness of the revelation, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. Concerning this, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it may leave me. And He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me." And then he says, "Therefore, I delight in weakness." Even if He doesn't take this thorn in the flesh away from me. Why? He says, in insults, in distress, in persecutions, in difficulties, in behalf of Christ, for when I am weak, then I am strong. When you think all these things that happened to Paul would have him by the hand, and some might think there's no way that I can get away from this. There's no way that I can go to this job anymore. There's no way that I can continue in this. There's no way that I can make it through this illness. There's no way that I can keep going and taking all these pills and doing all that I do. Well, you know what? In our weakness, God is made strong. And his promise to us is that his grace is sufficient. What he did for us on the cross is enough. So even if this is it, you know what? It's okay. Because I know what Christ means to me. And that love of Christ is so powerful. Turn to John 10, 22 and 30. And we're going to close with this right here. Because as Jesus was in the furnace with them and he was showing them and talking with them and walking around as King Nebuchadnezzar saw them, and then when they were released, it was like nothing touched them. That's the promise of heaven, isn't it? No tears in heaven, no sorrow given. When we're up there, there's going to be no tears in heaven. When we're up there, you're not going to smell the smell of sin. You're not going to smell the smell of struggles. You're not going to smell the smell of temptation. Nothing is going to have us damaged because 1 Corinthians 15 says our body's going to change in the twinkling of an eye. But in John 10, this is what Jesus says as he is talking about, I am the good shepherd and I am the gate. 22 through 30 says, at that time the feast of dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter and Jesus was walking in the temple area in the portico of Solomon. The Jews then surrounded him and began saying to him, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you did not believe me. The works that I do in my Father's name, these testify of me. But you do not believe because you are not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. His hand is much stronger than the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. And what God can save you from my hand, I'll show you. But Jesus says, no one can snatch them out of my hand. He says, my Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand, and I and the Father are one. Boy, that went well, because they wanted to stone Jesus after that, because they still didn't believe him. But when we take this promise of Jesus and understand this, that if we bow down to the image, if we bow down to anything else, then we're the ones that jumped out of his hand. But nobody can pluck us from it. Nobody can snatch us from it. Because when Jesus has you, he has you. And even if things don't seem like they're going right in your life, he still has you. And you're going to be okay. My prayer today, honestly, is that this message is a message of encouragement and a message of hope. Because I know that some of us are struggling with some things in our lives today. I know we are. And we might put on our church face, oh, how are you doing? I'm great. But we know how we are. And we talked about it this morning about our prayers to God and how sometimes we're a little shallow, and we read how Jeremiah just let it all out. Let God know. Let God know what's going on. Because he's there with you. He's got you in his hand. And you know what? Even if we don't get the answer we think we want, he's still got you. If you're here today and you're struggling with something and you would like prayers of the church, we're here for you. We love you, and that's what family does for one another. But if you're here today and you're not his sheep, he said, because my sheep know my voice, and I got them. To become a part of his flock, we must trust in him, give our lives to him, be baptized into Christ, have our sins washed away, and the Lord adds to his number daily those who are being saved. Why wait? Today's the day. If you need anything, let us know. Come up front while we stand and while we sing.